All right, good morning. Welcome to the pipeline, the distribution team pipeline AMA, first one we've had. We've got a bit of an agenda. We're going to start with looking at a number of failures that we've had over the past week or two, and then probably step into a few other topics and expand upon that. So with that, I direct everybody's attention over to the spreadsheet that Mitch has been maintaining, or at least get started, I should say. He's not yet necessarily going to be the maintainer. I guess we'll just start with the very first one. Start looking at that and see if we make any headway with that, with any of the issues there.
Gotcha. So that just to kind of level set on that first one.
Yeah.
The HA validate nightly. Looks like you created that, Gerard, like 6 months ago, and then we've been recently, I guess, adding.
We used to have a moderate amount of problems with this a long time ago, and
Gotcha. And then there's a gap, it looks like, between Mitch's comment from five months ago to 3 days ago.
Yeah.
But kind of an ongoing problem, I guess.
So I can give a bit of context on that. One, it almost always failed due to timeout, like except when it was failing for some other reason, like 6 months ago, when the Ansible stage itself like failed, like it couldn't run reconfigure because of some race conditions and other issues. But the pattern now we are seeing is timeout because of multiple reasons. One, we are running the entire QA pipeline. We were running it in a sequential mode, like the entire end-to-end pipeline test suits from one after another, and it can take about 4 hours, which because of that test suite being so big, it can take 4 hours. And we had a automatic timeout of like 2 hours set in that project, and we had a retry mode enabled. So it means QA failed, a retry was automatically triggered, which took another X hours. And by the time this entire downstream pipeline completed, the one that triggered it hits its timeout. Like we had 4 hours set for that one. So that's the context of why this job has been failing consistently. The job actually failed not because the package was bad or anything. The QA failures were almost always unrelated. It was usually timeout. So I had some MR sub. One is we are now attempting to do parallel processing, like we will be running QA. We split it to 5 different jobs and it will be run parallelly, which should hopefully get it under the 2-hour timeout limit, like a reasonable amount of time. So once that is in, we can, or at least I hope that we will stop seeing this nightly errors. Another thing is provision is kind of deprecated. We decided to consolidate all our efforts on the environment toolkit Get that quality has been building. So we spending too much time on provisioner might not be the best use of our time. It might be better to switch to Get as soon as possible and phase out provisioner completely, because that is going to be our official way of orchestrating and deploying GitLab. So I had opened an issue. I'll find the issue and link it in the agenda. I had opened an issue to replace provisioner with Get, but we will have to make some decisions on what reference architecture will we be testing it against. Will we be imitating what we have with provisioner right now? Because multi-node architecture will cost money, and PGHA comes with 3000K reference architecture, which is going to take around 9 nodes, like PGHA, Redis HA, and all those combined. So the head headways we made for handling this one. One is fixing this nightly failures by splitting the QA to multiple or parallel jobs. Second one is we have to start thinking about getting rid of provision itself and move towards the new thing, Get. So that's essentially about this issue.
Thanks for all that context. I think that helps kind of level set maybe the effort to put behind. So let me back all the way into like, I'm looking at the recent comments. We switched it to 3 hours. I see DJ
Yeah.
Visioner to 3 hours. That was a couple days ago.
And it didn't work. 3 hours wasn't enough. And quality said 4 hours might be logical because we are running the entire test suite one after another.
Gotcha. So a super simplistic idea, and I'm not suggesting this is a long-term solution, but like if we're not going to spend time on the provision, or maybe we just bump the time up even more to see if it passes, to understand how long it actually takes, and then back it down from there.
We can do that. I actually have the parallel MR up for review with DJ. So in case that parallelization works and everything works, it might 3 hours might be
3 hours should be enough. Yeah. Okay. If it's parallel. Okay.
Okay. Any other thoughts on this, on these failures? Anybody else have a repeating thought?
I'm just going to throw some super quick notes in the spreadsheet just so we know like what ones we talked about. And
okay.
folks can feel free to, obviously I just threw a quick note in there.
Yeah.
Jared, you want to drive the next one?
Sure. I was just trying to get some notes in there. Hopefully I've got that accurate. Feel free to correct my statements there if I'm wrong, Parlu. The next one's an easy one because I've been dealing with that. The UBI release for certification. That is the job that I wrote for pushing images up to Red Hat. We've had some issues with that because my testing effectively was on .com, and this is now running on the dev instance. And so there are differences in the what happens inside the pipeline, at least from the view of the script. So I just pushed up another MR last night. Haven't actually had a chance to take a look if DJ had any comments or thoughts on it yet. But the basic problem, one of the basic problems was that the script was written to pull the images from .com, the registry.gitlab.com, and then push them up to Red Hat. And running in dev or running on the dev instance, those images are not there at the time the job runs. So I've rewritten the script to try to pull images from the dev registry and then push them. And then if you're running off of your own branch and so forth, it should pull it off of the registry.gitlab.com. The other piece of that is that when it's out on dev, when it's getting the tagged builds running on it, the image tags are different. They're not all the same tag as the release, which I was not aware of either. So I've made some adjustments for that, and hopefully that will start to work here soon. So
Gotcha. So I see where we OR the environment variable for the registry, and then I see we've added the version.
Yep.
In the list.
Okay. DJ pointed me to that the version numbers are in variables in that CI pipeline. So I was able to just use those
Leverage those, gotcha.
variable names, and then we pull from them. But only if we're running on dev. If we're not running on dev, we're running on the .com instance, then we use effectively the commit reference, which should be the branch name. So if someone wants to actually try, so like I'm developing something that should be going into UBI, and I want to push it up to Red Hat to verify that it's actually working correctly, I would use the UBI pipeline variable to basically force the UBI pipeline to run, or I give it the UBI 8, make my branch with UBI 8 on the end, so it automatically runs the UBI pipeline. And when it runs that, it will actually, I did have to add on, there's a variable now, I think push to Red Hat, you set to true. It'll then run that job and push up, and it will pull all the images from the previous build of your branch, so that it'll be all tagged with your branch name. So I'm hoping that it will operate properly both on the .com and the dev instances. So we'll start to see. All right. That's it. So the next one, GitLab UBI builder. Nothing provides Perl interpret. I have not actually looked at this. Actually, it looks like it's closed.
I think this one was just transient on a subsequent run. It worked. So.
Okay.
Yeah. So this was one that was actually broken by a Perl package upstream.
Okay.
I believe. I think that was this one.
Yeah, this was strictly a problem with the packaging upstream in the UBI. It pulled it down. We told it to do the install, and it goes, I don't know where this dependency is. And the next pool of metadata didn't have that problem.
Yeah, so it might have been like these packages might have been in the middle of being updated upstream type thing.
Okay.
So with that, it's kind of like Perl had been, when we'd done the ask, Perl had been updated, but it couldn't reach the new Perl libs or the new Perl interpreter yet or something like that, based on like order of update in the repo or something.
All right. Check docs link. Okay. Haven't seen this one yet either. We don't have an issue for it yet, huh? All right.
Yeah, that's a transient one, right? Something at the GitLab end failed when we tried to call it, like when we tried to clone the repo. So I haven't seen it anywhere else. Just this one instance.
Okay.
That's kind of an issue in and of itself, that our pipeline suffered from a lot of transient failures, which to me kind of speaks to our pipelines don't have a lot of resilience built in. Like, it's just transient things can derail the process and a human has to intervene. So what can we do to start looking at making these processes more resilient so they can just self-heal and move on and
Gotcha, like a retry.
They fail.
Retries?
Yeah. Well, more than retries, because retries don't really tell us a lot. Like a way to actually have it catch the failure, send it to a log, do the retry, and then we have a log of like what were the transient failures, so we can go this. I mean, this will sound weird, but like I've had situations where there are 10 shards and shard 3 is always failing. So we take it offline, completely rebuild it, put it back up, and now it works. They were all the same. They were all provisioned the same, all exactly right. But shard 3 just had a conniption every time you hit it. So I've seen things like that happen, and being able to identify that, right? DJ and I talked about this a bit in light of the package download from Amazon S3, that if we can figure out exactly which one we're hitting, if it's a specific part of their data center, if that's the one that's always failing, we can tell them, hey, you have a problem, be it a flapping port on a switch somewhere in their backplane or whatever, but that gives us more insight to what's going on, more than just it failed and it retried. Because I feel like that's our biggest problem is observability, is that we have these things that go on, but they're not auto logging. It's up to us to remember to put them all into issues, but those issues don't collate or give us any longer term scale of like types, kinds, where, how, when, how long, the things that we would need to really start to zero in on problems and making more of a picture out of it.
I hear you there. But I don't want our team to be spending a huge amount of time trying to make that happen. We have far higher priorities. We should reach out to quality engineering and our engineering efficiency groups to help us do that. But in we need to have something in the backing that's actually doing something with all of our log output so that we can do anything with the metrics. Because trying to filter out, oh, this job failed because Red Hat borked a repository for like 2 seconds, or oh, this job failed because all of US 3 went down, right? We need to, yes, be able to know the difference between there is a data center down and something blipped, and the instance where, oh, this pipeline's running on an old SHA, so that doesn't actually exist anymore. Right? Those are distinct, different things, but us taking the time to do any work to like separate those out in detail, we don't have time. Like I'd love to, but we just don't.
Agreed. So maybe a next step on this would be to create an issue with what we would like to see, and then we can start to get some eyes on it from other teams to actually implement it. But I think it would be helpful for us to kind of document like, hey, this is what we'd like to see, maybe even some specific examples of if an upstream repo fails, we would like to see messages that look like this, for debugging and whatnot. Agreed, we've got other things to do or other higher value work. I hate to say at this moment, but it does feel like it's something that we could get some eyes on if we can kind of lay out what we're looking to have happen.
I know that one of the things I see a lot of times when I start looking at errors, it's sometimes very difficult to try to figure out what was going on at the time. It shouldn't even be at the time. What was going on in the pipeline? There seems to be a lot of times we have stuff in there and then all of a sudden we get an error just from like copy of files or something, something bizarre like that. It's like we don't really know what was supposed to be going on at that point. So in a sense, if we ended up putting a little bit more into our pipelines as to what step we're doing, might assist in trying to figure out what's actually happening. I wish I had some ready examples. I have to keep an eye out and start pulling them together. So when we have these, I can say, look, here's where it was just some error that pops up saying couldn't copy a file or couldn't do something, and not really sure what's going on or what was supposed to be happening at that point.
So
Again,
some context around it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just context mostly. Again, I understand that sometimes it's several people on the team have been working with the pipeline and built the pipeline, so they know generally what's going on and can just go narrow right in and say, oh, that's this sort of failure and that's why it happened, versus, okay, now I get to go open up the CI file, start tracing through what commands were getting executed at that point and try to figure out where that error actually occurred in the series of commands.
So that is somewhat addressable by setting setx.
True.
Okay.
Yep.
Gotcha. So it fails right
Some
away.
of these errors that are super vague are not our tools. That's actually, we called a command through an API and its entire response is, yeah, 302, dude.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will say that we probably don't want to do set X because that is how you can leak credentials in the pipeline.
That's correct.
Mitchell and I have fallen over that. That was not fun. Friday to 5 p.m. having to explain to security folks why we had to page them. So just saying we don't want ever do set X in a pipeline. And I think, I may be mistaken, but I think they now have a thing that will block you from being able to put set X in a pipeline because there was way too many leaks like that in the course of a 1.5-month period. So security, I think, had that added in. Don't quote me on that, but I know that it was a large hot discussion for a while because we weren't the only ones that had that happen. To the point where they made a tool where they could excise logs automatically based on the job ID because it happens so often. To that end, I have another question on pipelines. I know that we have an overview for the Charts CNG pipelines, and I've looked at that. That chart's a little out of date, but it's not the chart, but the graphic is out of date a little bit for that. But do we have a similar thing for Omnibus? So I feel like one of the largest challenges that we have is that it's follow the CI pipeline, but I'll be honest, our CI YAML setups are very, very complicated, and it takes a long time to go through. And I think that we benefit by kind of charting out what we do and why, and then we can use that as how can we make this easier? Because some of that complication is organic growth because we fix things over time. But if we know the why, it's in this order, then we can go, well, can we simplify this and avoid the problems we fixed in the past? Because I think that's the other thing going on in our pipelines is there's a lot of complexity that we can boil out that's only there because it's been added on to organically over the last, 7 years, 8 years? So.
Yeah, and I think that as a maintainer, I can tell you that comes down to us need to be better at documenting and maintaining said documentation. We have known technical debt issues just to get our pipelines to the right standard, which, by the way, is coming soon. So that we're using workflows instead of the old style, and things are going to get really interesting when 14.0 flips around. So be aware, folks. One thing that we should consider doing is taking our documentation, or at least pointing the documentation in such a way that we are actually able to make use of the pipeline editor's diagrams that are generated by it, so that we don't have to try and maintain a diagram of what happens, but instead have the ability to just see the diagram of what happens.
Mhm.
Now, that being said, we do need to have functional DAG, we do need to have workflow, which we're not. So
Can you expand DHA? Because I don't know that acronym, please.
DAG, dicyclic
Direct
something.
acyclic graph.
Graph, yeah.
That.
Yeah. Okay. DAG. I thought you said DHA. I'm like, what? I just like, huh?
We need to grow.
Hey.
So yeah, my thoughts on that is, to be honest, almost all of our CA refactorings was either we wanting to try out the new feature, like backend release the new feature and we wanted to try it out in our pipeline, or either we wanted to reduce the total duration of our pipeline. Like we went with parallel spec runs, essentially because it was taking too much time to run the entire test suite. So we went with parallel ones. We tried to, I wanted to see how include worked. So I split the CA configuration from Universe GitLab to things that run on GitLab.com and things that run on dev.gitlab.com to two different files. So I don't think we have ever actually sat down and refactored our pipeline with just that intention to clean up the pipeline. It might be high time before we haven't done that. So it might be good to schedule actual developer time to clean up the pipeline. Regarding documentation, we have a new visualization tool that we can use. What I have done in the past is I had listed all the CA jobs, like there's a page in the docs. I have linked it in the agenda. So it essentially lists all the CA jobs, which was very manual and I never want to do that again. Because finding out or deciphering all the workflow rules and where something runs and where something doesn't run is no fun. So ideally, I want GitLab to be able to tell me that, like, if I give a CA YAML configuration, get me a list of each jobs, tell me what are the conditions it might or might not run, that we can embed into our documentation. So yes, it might not come tomorrow or day after tomorrow, but that we might start asking for that.
Yeah, and kind of taking away some of what I hear in there. So I feel like we do a lot of beta testing in our pipelines, which causes us a lot of grief. I feel like we should make a split, like we have a production pipeline that's our every nightly, and it's only things that are solid, stable, have been around, and that we separate that testing, that playing with stuff, into some other staging pipeline that maybe runs once a week, twice a week. It runs less often, but it's, hey, we can dog food new features over here, but it won't impact production. Because like I think the biggest problem that we have is that we continually get just hardcore dog fooding in what's essentially a mission critical system. So, and I feel like that's doing us a disservice, especially as we're trying to improve our velocity, right? Because I see this a lot, that things fail quite often. We don't have anywhere near enough end-to-end coverage. Like, and I know Steve and I've had this conversation where it's frustrating to come in to do the work that we're going to do, but like there's 15 things before our pipeline that are broken, but they get to our pipeline anyway because there's no breaks, there's nothing to break it ahead to make it fail early. And then our pipelines, we have a lot of this dog fooding beta testing stuff, right? Like we really should not be beta testing in our mission critical pipeline, which is what our nightly is, because that's our canary in the coal mine, so to speak. If that's not functioning every day solid, just in and of itself, we're putting the entirety of the product at risk. And I feel like now that we're at a certain scale, we have to weigh that out.
Actually,
I don't.
I don't think we had broken pipelines because we were testing things. We mostly have complex CA configuration because we were testing things. Like, for example, using workflow rules, we implemented that only for dev.gitlab.org configuration, because essentially it was trying to see how we can make use of rules in our pipeline, but it never went further than that. We never implemented it in the GitLab comp pipelines. I think we have it in somewhere in charts, but not, we have it in CNG, but not in charts. So when I said we testing things, complicate things, I meant it complicates the CA configuration file, like how readable that is or how complete that is from using a feature perspective. Breaking things like pipeline actually failing because we tested things, it rarely happens. We often catch that as soon as possible, like we might forget something needs to, or we might forget auto deploy pipeline was in the mix, but we never thought about that when we wrote the rule. So stuff like that happens, and we almost catch that immediately or the next day when that pipeline runs. But I do like the idea of having a separate pipeline to test things. Given spinning up a different infrastructure for omnibus GitLab pipeline is just very difficult. Like testing CA pipelines of our project is extremely difficult because our conditions are very strict. Like if the namespace is this and if the project name is this, then do this. So you cannot test this on gitlab.com or dev.gitlab.org. You need to create a new instance which maps the repo structure that we use and test it there. So this might not be something that we want to do every day. We can try to automate it, or we can try to keep a separate instance for testing this, but I'm not sure how feasible or how much worth the time spent it will be. But yeah, it's just my experience on testing CA configuration things. I have a personal GitLab instance where I have mapped GitLab org namespace and GitLab namespace to imitate dev and com. So, and no, it's not fun.
Yeah, in terms of dog fooding pipeline features, we typically we're not beta testing them. In fact, the omnibus is usually quite a bit behind on dog fooding these things, which you'll see most of the rest of the GitLab projects are using merge request pipelines and stuff like that, and we're quite a bit behind on these things, and we're not fully transitioned to the new workflow rules and stuff like that. But so it's not that we're beta testing them. It's kind of just dog fooding, and it's typically only when we are looking for a benefit, and there's often a lot of benefit to be had by those CI features for us. Other than definitely it ends up complicating the pipeline, but generally the stability of the pipeline and how fast it goes has typically gotten better with us dog fooding those features. So I agree with Balu that it hasn't been so much like stability problems as it is yet. It definitely complicates things. Like Balu mentioned, right now in Omnibus, we actually, based on environment, we have two different ways of doing things, right? We have workflow rules for one environment and non-workflow rules, the old syntax only syntax for the other environment, but those are literally composed into the same GitLab CI file at one point. So I agree, it gets quite complicated by doing that.
I suppose then just a temperature check. Like if I make the statement, I don't trust our pipelines to actually run the testing that we need to have because I don't think they work half the time. Am I alone in that feeling? Am I getting a weird sentiment? Am I way askew from the rest of the team? I mean, I just want to know, because that's kind of how I feel. I feel like the running the pipeline in GitLab.com is essentially I'm throwing a rock blindly and hoping it lands somewhere I want, and that I'm better off testing locally thoroughly to make sure it's good because I have no guarantee that the pipelines are going to bubble up problems. Like that's kind of where I function from most days, because I don't trust our pipelines to not have random failures, skip things, miss things, have holes, gaps. Like I don't really have a lot of trust in it because we've had a lot of things that go through, little problems that like we'll break out prod, we'll miss a thing with SE Linux, we'll miss a this, we'll miss a that. We have a lot of gaps that we have covered, it's there, but the pipelines just miss it. Even though it's there, it should run, it just doesn't do it. And so I've lost my trust in our pipelines over the last probably year. So, but the dead silence, I feel like maybe I am.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, like, so my thought process was our test suite. It almost always does what we have asked it to do, but what we have asked it to do might not be the most efficient things. Like, for example, our Omnibus GitLab test suite is essentially a chef spec, which technically just mocks everything. Like, it's in no way a test of how this will behave in a actual live system. We are not using test kitchen, or we are not using anything like that. So at the very basic level, our Omnibus GitLab test suite essentially checks whether the right files are rendered out or whether the right services are created or not. We don't actually test how that service actually behaves, or whether services actually run or anything like that. So I often work from this assumption, like if I need to verify something actually works, my go-to plan is build a package, install it somewhere, and go and test that feature. Like, so what I expect from dev.gitlab.org pipeline is, one, get me a package to test it myself. Two, ensure it builds on all operating systems. I only expect that pipeline to do just those two things for me. So that I'm not sure if that expectation is the right mentality to have about our pipeline, but I think it didn't cause as much frustration as it did to you because I had such a limited expectation.
Yeah, and I think part of it is also the downstream. Like our QA tests seem to not actually test the application itself. They test the APIs, but like we don't have an integration test at all, right? Like things like when fastkeys broke, that should have just screamed itself out from the rooftops in our pipelines, but yet nothing caught it, right? And as far as I can tell, we haven't really added a test to catch that in play. So it's that kind of stuff that's just, again, for me, it's like we brought it up before and we've talked about it and it's a good idea and we'll pass it off to the team or we'll do this or we'll do that. It's not prioritized. But I feel like basically we're spoiling ourselves slowly by not having coverage to protect ourselves because there's 8 or 9 of us and 700 other folks throwing stuff at us, and we just don't have enough of a shield wall to keep from getting hit all the time. And I feel like that's kind of where we're getting to. At least that's where I feel like I have no guarantee that as much as I do with my work, that I have no guarantee that it's going to have enough of the quality of production level quality that I'd want to get out the door, right? Which makes me obsessively overdue. Like I go double check and I spend extra time on things because it's nerve-wracking because we've had, I can think of like 5 or 6 major misses in the last 4 months, right? From the fastkeys fail to the SE Linux fail to I forget what it was, but it was like the secret pass around fail where the stuff didn't update, like things that break people's clusters and break people's deployments really badly, and we're not catching it. I feel like that's the bigger risk to us more than anything else, is that we don't have the ability to spend the time on it because we're prioritized off of it, and our pipelines are suffering, and we're spending more time than we should trying to catch those things. Because I know that all of us, like when we see that go wrong, all of us don't want that to happen. So we're spending more time on our tests, which makes reviews take longer. It's like there's got to be a way to measure that time, right? Like I feel like I probably spend at least 6 extra hours per review that I wouldn't normally spend if I could trust the pipeline to check certain things. And I feel like that's a slow burn of my time.
Any review that's 6 hours is way too long. So that is definitely a problem. I'm not going to argue with that.
So one thing I wanted to, like, I actually understood what you meant when we didn't have integration tests. Yes, Omnibus GitLab functionality doesn't get any integration tests. Whatever things we have caught due to QA failures is just luck or byproduct, because QA tests are essentially testing GitLab functionality, not whether the package behaves as we expected or whether the services interact with as we expected. And we have never written integration tests for Omnibus GitLab's products. We are testing GitLab as the final result, and oftentimes we have caught things because QA fails, like the Docker container couldn't come up because reconfigure failed, and they let us know and we figured out something was wrong. But it was not specifically written for testing that. It caught that because it caused a bigger noise. So I would love for us to write integration tests for our product, like our product being the package or the Docker image, and ensuring everything works fine. But yeah, prioritization and time, I'm not sure.
Yeah, a big test gap we have is that the QA tests only test the Docker image, which is only one, just like it's only one environment, right? Like it's just our Ubuntu environment. So that's definitely like a gap that we have related to both what Balu and Robert were saying there.
Yeah, I'd love to get this stuff cataloged. I know, Robert, you mentioned, hey, we've talked about other teams doing this. Full transparency, 1.5 years, 2 years ago, we didn't have essentially dedicated quality folks for distribution. Now we do. I think what we can do is help feed the quality team the issues and the gaps, and then we can follow up to make sure that those things do get prioritized now that we've got some resources. So to Robert's point, right, the slow burn, it's easy to, hey, it's just a little bit worse this time, but then over time, the level of friction ramps up, and then pretty soon it's like a 6-hour review, right? And 5 of it's like getting the environment to a spot. And so, yeah,
it's not
I don't
even
know.
getting the environment. Setting up an environment is 20 minutes. It's setting up 12 environments to make sure, like, testing, because we only test the other ones. We only test Ubuntu, and so
That's
we
what I'm
don't
saying.
test CentOS. Yeah, like, we don't test.
We're filling in the gaps in coverage ourselves, right? By either mocking up an environment or, and so those are the pieces that I think the first step is to kind of identify the gaps. And then we can determine like, hey, this is a really bad gap based on what could happen or what has happened in the past. And then those become much easier priority calls when we do talk with the quality folks, because we do, this is something new this, I wouldn't say this year, but recently, that Tanya and the quality folks attend the scheduling and the prioritization calls with the leads, specifically to understand the kind of problems that we're up against, and to help us get those quality related issues identified and scheduled. So I know it sounds kind of political, or not political, but yes, we can get other teams to work on it, but I do think we need to kind of get it laid out a little bit so that someone else could pick it up and start to action against it, right? Right now, that's the piece I'm not sure we've got.
We need to set the technical groundwork of the expectations that we have, so that the people who come to do the implementation actually have somewhere to go.
Yeah, we're saying the same thing, right? It's one thing to like hand wavy, hey, we got gaps here and gaps there. It's another to have like some issues laid out of like, hey, we don't trust this pipeline because we have gaps in the number of environments, because anyway, that's the message I'm trying to get out, is that I think we can improve the situation just by kind of cataloging and understanding what we're up against a little bit better, so that someone else, another team, could come in and push things forward.
Well, and one of the things I see there is that, okay, yeah, we're only testing effectively one distribution. We start trying to test all of them. That's going to shoot the budget of all the testing way up. Is that going to be?
That's true. That's why I think we got to prioritize it, right? That's why we can't do all of them, but we got to understand, like, okay,
Well, we have an
most of
open
our
issue
customers
for that.
run this.
Yeah, we have an open issue for that. And I think where we landed was you wanted to test minimum Debian CentOS, and that would hit basically the RHEL variant and the other. And then if there was a need for it, there was the SUSE, because they're a little bit different than RHEL, right? We have an open issue. It's been in discussion for about 1-2 months, maybe 3. So
Is that linked in the thing here?
I don't know if it is, but
Not.
Yeah, so
Throw it in the agenda.
Cost will definitely be a factor in any of the solutions we come up with, but we probably should make sure that doesn't prevent us from logging the issues, or like proposing, like coming up with like, these are problems we would like solved. But yeah, cost is definitely going to be a problem, especially like we were talking about 6-hour reviews or something like that. Like, big one for me for that is environment setup, when I have to set up multiple environments to test, let's say PGHA Geo and an upgrade of PGHA Geo. Like, that's quite intensive, but also to automate that test, like that's probably just testing that even in an automated fashion, that's probably like $100 every time you test or something like that, right? To set up something.
Yeah. But what was the cost to have all of our customers on SE Linux fail and support hours all spent into that customer loss of goodwill? And from what I understand from a support engineer, we lost a premium seat customer over it. So what's the analysis cost for us not testing?
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying, is that obviously the cost is going to be a factor in the solution, but yeah, we should not prevent that, like not let that get stuck in our brains to the point of us not even bothering to write down the problems we're encountering with the pipelines, right?
Yep, I'm aligned to that.
Yeah.
Cool. I know we're over, and the CFO speaks in about 15 minutes, and so I didn't know if we wanted to talk about the final pipeline.
I would
that
say
you've been
we
working
defer
on.
that. I need to get back and get my head wrapped around that some more.
Okay.
To address it. So why don't we defer it? I don't necessarily want to have this meeting too often, but do we want to schedule like in 2 weeks? We can cover that, cover any new pipeline failures and questions that people have. And then maybe I'd like to probably get this eventually to monthly. I don't want to overwhelm us with and tie up a lot of time.
How about we split the difference for this one and do 3 weeks?
Okay.
And then we'll have some more data to look at. In the meantime, I'm gonna, if we've got some follow-up issues to create, we can get those going, and then that'll give us enough time to review with the quality folks. What I want to do is like this recording, these notes, any of the issues that we've talked about. I want to get those over to Nick and Nelia along with Tanya, to make them more aware of like, hey, we had this call, here's what came out of it, and here's what's happening next. So 3 weeks seems like enough time to kind of get some wheels moving a little bit, and then we'll have some more data to look at, along with hopefully some progress on getting the quality folks kind of plugged into these issues.
Okay.
If folks want to meet in 2 weeks, I'm fine with that. I know we're all busy.
3 is fine.
I would
Okay.
actually ask, can we consider something else in addition to that? At one point, very long ago, as a team, we were able to take 1 day a week or 1 day a cycle or something like that and work on tasks that were important to us as a team, but not necessarily scheduled. And I think that fell away. I'm not sure what this, I know we had some discussions, but it just kind of went away quietly. I would suggest that we consider that again, so that we can have like a day, even if we just do it together, like a big call, and just do a group triage together and just work things out that are things that are team vital. I don't want to call it a team building day, but there's been a lot of talk about team building days and this and that. I just saw it get added to the handbook, but it would be good for us as a team to get together and solidify our own stuff, like basically clean our own house. Because I feel like that's a thing that we used to have more time to do. And I hate to say we need to schedule it in, but sometimes you just need to schedule in time to make time. And
the only thing I don't like about that, Robert, is that it kind of, the synchronous nature kind of excludes people whereas if we can at least get the things into issues, we can occasionally touch base, but then everybody's got some context in front of them to work from. So not opposed to it, but I'd like to have at least, things laid out in the issues so that if people can't make a synchronous, that they've got, some visibility into what we're working on.
I would agree there. I think one of the values that we had in play at the time that was actually a thing was that we were intentionally leaving at least 8 hours, a full day of work per person as a go do whatever you want, as long as it's going to be valuable. I'll toss this out there that like the stuff I did to the containers to rework the initialization behaviors started as, this is pissing me off, I'm going to go fix it. And right now, as a maintainer, I am overstrained. I don't have the ability to go, I need to go fix this now. I would love to take a day or two in a cycle and go fix the templating engine behaviors, but I don't have the time, and I won't have the time for at least a quarter. So that's really kind of what it is. And I know that we organizationally, not just our team, did away with that practice. We just need to consider how can we integrate that kind of openness in addressing an issue like that.
Yeah, and it was the openness of the free day to work on stuff that we've done away with. So like if there's something important to you to work on, like it has to be in an issue. It already was in our previous process. We already did have, like we always had issues for them as well. But we can't, what we did away with was a process that where the process explicitly said that you have a day a month to work on any issue at GitLab that you might think is important type thing. So we don't have like that process has been removed here at GitLab in terms of that. The idea being that, if an issue is important enough that it will get scheduled, but like as we see all the time, there's issues that we find important that we know are important that we work on as unplanned anyways. And the important thing is just to like, when you make that call, to raise it up to Joshua and Steven and stuff like that. So we don't have the old process. We don't have like the dedicated day a month. But there is, you know, if something is important, and it's only going to take a day to knock out, and you have that capacity, I think there's still room to do that. It just isn't within the like free day to work on anything process.
Thanks, DJ. I'm obviously aligned with that. I do think, to DJ's point, just to hammer on that a little bit more, if it's important enough for us to do it, I'd love to have it be part of the scheduled work, right? Because then it improves the visibility of that work, and people are aware that there's these other things that we're bringing to the table. Whereas if we do it sort of out of the loop on the scheduling, the work still gets done, but then the product and the other folks don't have good visibility into what else the team is working on, right? And so I know we're always going to have a large bucket of unplanned, or I call it unschedulable work, because a lot of it's things that come to us after some previous work from a team has been done. We're sort of on the hook to get the last mile. But yeah, the idea that, hey, if these are important to you, that's why I've, you know, encouraged folks to add a quick comment to the scheduling issue, right? Because we do go through that every week typically, and if there's things in there that we needed that are no brainers, we typically just go ahead and do get it scheduled. And so, just to reiterate, that's where the team voice, I hope, will come through, as if, you know, hey, here's an issue, it hasn't had any attention, let's consider scheduling it, and then we can make that call.
Okay. I feel you there, especially because product isn't paying attention a lot. The thing that is concerning is that we are still having that constant bias of just throw it at the schedule and pray it sticks. Right? Like observationally, that's how it can feel. And that is how it has happened in the past. That free day, that explicit free day per se, we don't want to have that, but we need to have room to be able to go do something that is not getting scheduled.
I agree with that. I'm just saying that if something is schedulable, let's bubble it up if we can, right? I'm not saying everything that everybody works on has to like go through the scheduling process. That's not. I'm just saying if there's something out there that we know we want to do, that we do take the opportunity to raise it if we can.
Then I'll be a little more direct then. I would like us to, from my perspective, I feel like the scheduling process is geared towards everyone servicing everything except for our team's mental health. Like Jason says, there's things he'd love to do that are annoying him as maintainer, that are making his life more difficult, that he can't get to. I know DJ has similar, Balu has similar, right? We have a fixed number of maintainers. I know Gerard and myself are working hard to try and join the ranks so that they're not up there alone. But I feel like we're talking nice things about it, but I'm not seeing action on it, right? And if there is action, then it needs to be more visible, but I just don't see that. And that takes its own toll beyond just, gosh,
what action would you propose, Robert?
Well, for one, we need to get just get product to agree, like, you know, no matter what, unless we have a, you know, billion-dollar opportunity, you can schedule X percentage of your work to be things to clean your own house. Because right now we have a lovely trimmed yard and a well-painted outside, and the walls inside are molding and the fridge is empty. That's kind of the metaphor I feel a lot, right? That there's things we want to get to, we need to get to, we know they're important, but they're constantly bumped. And I feel like that feeling that it's like, hey, we need to do this so that our lives aren't difficult, so that we can actually, you know, do our work effectively, efficiently, is always the first thing bumped off that ladder.
Gotcha. Let's get some specific examples of those. And then again, I can use that like, hey, these are things that we wanted to get to, we're not getting to them. Again, if if we don't have concrete examples to work from, it's a much more difficult message to get across. I think Josh, if he understood what all else we're up against, I think he's typically flexible. What I'm hearing is we need to trim down the number of things that we're scheduling as deliverables to free up more time for other work to happen. But I need to have visibility into what that other work looks like, right?
It also sounds to me, Robert, like maybe we're not doing a good job of being transparent at like the end of to the rest of the team here at the end of the scheduling issue. I think that line in the sand that you're calling out, like you threw out like $1 billion opportunity. I think we actually do work off a line like that, and it typically is not $1 billion. It's lower than that, but we are working off a line when we do the scheduling. And from my perspective, what happens is we have more of those that cross that line, those priorities, than we have people to work on things. And that's typically like we go through a prioritization process, and that's where you keep seeing, at least from my perspective, that's where I keep seeing things not dropped, but pushed further and further out. At least hopefully not dropped. If they're dropped, I think we need to bring those.
So one improvement I saw was in the last 3 milestones, we have started actively including technical debt issues into scheduling process. Like this has been a very, very recent thing. And I think that did have an impact, not a very big impact, but that did resulted in us getting some technical debt issues covered. Because essentially the schedule, the percentage of input that developers each, like personal each, in the official scheduling process is very minimal. Like we cannot, like if I see a pipeline failing repeatedly, and a recent example is the HA validate nightly thing. Like I am seeing it fail every time, and getting it properly scheduled. I know it will get scheduled, but it might not get scheduled as quick as I want. So the process is not to blame, because when we compare the pros and cons on what we actually want in the product, what the product side of, or the product phase of our company needs versus what irritates us, that weighing is always going to be difficult. But I think while the process does not have space or time for that personal itch to be covered, I think our team's structure or our team's interactions with each other gives us the practical space to do that. Like I can spend 20 minutes and get this done and send it over to DJ for him to review it and merge whenever. Like we don't have that strict of a thing. Like you have to prioritize this by not doing anything else. We don't have such a mindset, or this team doesn't have such a punitive way of seeing things. Like you must do scheduled things. Well, yes, you must do scheduled things, but that doesn't mean you cannot do anything else. You, provided you have the capacity and space in your plate. But to be honest, I don't think that open day thing will come back to the official scheduling process of a product company, because that is like an engineer's day out in a product company. So I'm not exactly very optimistic how that can come back officially, but I still think we might be able to make the same concept, but in a different implementation, like different way of implementing that. It can be like X percentage of all the issues we schedule for a milestone must be technical debt issues, irrespective of what product priorities are. Like product gets to decide 85% of what goes in, and 15% is from the engineering perspective. Like I'm giving examples that we might be able to work around that issue. And I think our team is flexible enough, for our team's way of functioning or self-driven way of doing things is flexible enough to accommodate that kind of work. So it's my personal take on how scheduling kind of impacts these type of issues.
Yeah, the tech debt thing, thanks for calling that out. I think that's an avenue that we can continue to use. I know we've gone recently through and tried to prioritize that work. I created a board and put it in the scheduling issue so that we can see what the prioritized tech debt looks like, and it can become part of the the regular process. With that said, I do want to jump over to the CFO call.
Yeah, I was gonna say, let's call it, since we're right up against, and actually we're.
Yeah, let's wrap on this one. Gerard, if you can get something on the schedule, again, the same around this time is good, because then the EMEA folks can hopefully make it next time.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for organizing this, Gerard, and I do appreciate all the input from the team. Great discussion.
All right, we'll have this again in about 3 weeks then.
Sounds good. See ya.
Bye-bye.